Today I'll tell you about a dwarf who killed more than Putin. Look at this kind, sweet, friendly face. This is Dr. Fauci. Take a closer look. He is the greatest mass murderer of our time. At the very least, he is accused of causing the deaths of 20 million people, putting him on par with Stalin, Hitler, and Mao Zedong, the most terrifying mass murderers in history.
Dr. Fauci is the single most evil.
Dr. Fauci is the most vicious mass murderer among those walking the earth today. He is 85 years old. 10 years ago, Dr. Fauci gave this speech at the beginning of President Trump's term when he was being sworn in as President of the United States, where he stated that during Trump's first term there would be an unexpected disease outbreak.
The challenge for the future administration in the field of infectious diseases, both chronic, meaning already existing diseases, and we certainly have a huge burden of those, as well as sudden outbreaks.
And Dr. Fauci has worked for every president since Gerald Ford in the early 70s, and so he held the same position, so he never stated that there would be a sudden outbreak. We checked the transcripts, we checked all the records available to us. Neither during Ford, nor Carter, nor Reagan's first or second term, nor during Bush or Clinton's first and second terms, or Bush's first and second terms, or Obama's first and second terms did Dr. Fauci. He served all of them.
But under Trump, he said it. How did he know? Why was he so confident? Why has no one ever asked about this or tried to find out? Right before leaving office, Joe Biden pardoned him for all his crimes. For all known and yet unknown crimes committed before Joe left office. I really don't understand why you would pardon someone who isn't guilty, because it immediately comes to mind that the authorities knew he committed a crime. What exactly did Dr. Fauci do to be put on the same level as the most hated people in human history? Dr. Fauci funded programs for the development of biological weapons. Let me repeat. Dr. Fauci, working for the government of the United States of America for Obama and Biden. Well, to be honest, for the Democratic Party of the United States, he was actively involved in the creation of biological weapons. Banned, no more, no less, at first for the CIA. We knew this because Tulsi Gabbard revealed all the information. When she held the position of Director of National Intelligence, she directly stated that he oversaw illegal research that led to the virus leaking from the laboratory.
At the same time, he illegally directed American taxpayers' dollars to fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, which led to the lab leak, and he knew about it, and then he lied about it to Congress. And since he lied about it to Congress just a year or two ago, he can be held accountable, and we should do that. Ladies and gentlemen, you know she hit the mark when all these media outlets like PBS, NPR, CNN keep insisting, no, the COVID-19 documents released by Gabbard don't prove her accusations against Fauci. You know what would prove it? Holding him accountable.
And then when Congress started to suspect that the CIA was doing something illegal, they called Fauci in and he lied. Since he lied to Congress after Biden had already given him an indulgence and forgiven all his past sins, he can and should be held accountable for this new offense. And now Senator Rand Paul, Fauci's main opponent, has sent him an official subpoena. Fauci is required to appear and testify. If he refuses, he will be sent to jail. The Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs has sent him a subpoena requiring his appearance because he did not appear voluntarily, even though he had previously promised to do so. The American people deserve answers. The fact is, he was spending our money, yours and mine, on things that were directly prohibited by our representatives in Congress. In other words, if this is true, and it seems like it is, but we have to say for now, if it is true, then he is a liar, a thief, a scoundrel, and a murderer. We are, of course, sure about this, but it still needs to be proven in court. And the first step, then, on the way to court, in this case when dealing with public servants, starts in the committees of Congress. So the subpoena has been served. He must appear before Congress at the end of July. Get your popcorn ready, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure it will be interesting. But the most interesting thing will be how the Washington media react to this. You can't remain untouchable if you lied to Congress, destroyed documents, and misled the public about the origins of a pandemic that, by the way, took millions of lives. Not just in the US, but all over the world. Such actions should not go unchecked and unpunished. That's why Rand Paul is doing the right thing now. Here's what Senator Paul wrote.
Here we go. Fauci, you're done. Fauci, I knew he was lying nonstop from the very beginning, but he was also destroying records from the start, sending letters and memos to the head of the National Institutes of Health saying, read this and destroy it. This is more like the way CIA agents communicate, not the executive branch. This is illegal. This is a criminal offense. They've already kind of cornered one of Dr. Fauci's assistants and charged him with destroying documents.
American intelligence has discovered a video confirming coronavirus research in China. But Fauci keeps denying and lying. A real goblin. Sorry for the comparison, dear goblins. Or goblins. Another hero of our time gets involved. The planet's first trillionaire, Elon Musk. If he sinks his teeth into something, he usually gets what he wants, right? And indeed, it turned out that he does. The National Institute of Infectious Diseases, led by Dr. Fauci, allocated $44 million of our money to study the risks of dangerous coronaviruses emerging. Thank you, Elon, for uncovering this. Professionals say it becomes obvious if you look at the COVID virus itself. At the molecular level, they took a natural bat coronavirus. They surgically removed the S protein, that's the spike protein, and inserted a human S protein to make the virus infectious to humans. It wasn't before. They turned a virus that was neutral to humans into something that could destroy humanity. The kind, sweet good guys weren't eating their bread for nothing, which we paid for. They created this virus artificially. That original coronavirus which lives in the natural environment in the intestines. Bats that live high in the mountains of eastern China in hard-to-reach caves. These bats do not come into contact with people. Even if you caught such a bat in the air and played hide-and-seek or tag with it, it would not infect you, despite having the coronavirus. It is not able to penetrate your cells. It doesn't have the necessary molecular mechanisms for that. You just wash your hands and go on with your life, without getting infected with anything. For the coronavirus to become like COVID, which hit all of us, a molecular structure needs to be added to it. A specific S protein. They created this virus specifically to infect whom? Us. People. They worked on it for a long time, and in the end they succeeded. Well done. They created something that can kill millions of people on planet Earth. Maybe they're working on something now that could kill billions. Whether they released it intentionally, accidentally, or to influence the US elections and harm Trump, we don't know. We suspect it, right? Great job. Research on gain of function, that's what it's called, at the Wuhan lab, very likely led to the emergence of COVID-19, the deaths of millions of people and trillions in losses. And he personally, Dr. Fauci, authorized these experiments despite the ban by Congress, and then he lied about it to Congress, and Biden covered for him until the very end. This is a classic example of a cover-up. Let's get to the bottom of this. Claudio Sheinbaum, well, that's the president of our neighboring country, Mexico, reacted to the closure of the organization through which research funding was coming. Claudio Sheinbaum responded positively to the news about the upcoming closure of the United States Agency for International Development, stating the agency was funding the political opposition. The agency and many other things, to be honest, it would be better if they were shut down. Even the communist Claudio Sheinbaum has become furious about what the Democrats have been doing. Simply put, they are stealing money from taxpayers and funding their own party and doing things that could kill those very taxpayers. Well, she responded positively to the news about the upcoming closure of USAID. noting that the agency funded the political opposition and was involved in many similar activities. Here's the truth. It would be better if it were shut down, she said. It's a corrupt organization. Well, just wonderful. And here's an interview with Taylor Sherry. Yes, she's the creator of the series Yellowstone on Joe Rogan's podcast, where she says, "And we all knew that. What's new?"
Joe Rogan says that Tulsi Gabbard gave a press conference. Here, listen.
Listen, intelligence reports she's leaving. She held that press conference about Fauci, where she talked about how he lied before Congress and that he definitely used American taxpayers' money to fund gain-of-function research through EcoHealth Alliance and the lab in Wuhan, China. And, nobody talks about it.
No. And by the way, didn't we all already know this?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time, says Joe Rogan, to hold him accountable. Here's Benny Johnson's interview with the chairman of the U.S. Government Oversight Committee, James Cober.
You've had some major frustrations. You've had serious disagreements with the Department of Justice regarding criminal cases, and you said that finally this logjam has moved a bit, and you're very glad about that. What about Dr. Fauci? There's a lot of news about Fauci. Wow, that was a powerful attack against him from Tulsi Gabbard. He's become a real thorn in your side. Now, Rand Paul has subpoenaed him. What's going to happen there?
Well, I think Rand will call him in and ask questions about the information Tulsi revealed because he lied to the House Oversight Committee. We had a special committee on COVID, which was headed by Dr. Brad Wenstrup from Ohio. He's retired now. We sent a criminal referral because he lied to Congress about deleting emails. He lied about not asking staff not to write about it in emails, to hide the truth from the American public and the administration. And at a time when we needed maximum transparency, Rand was always focused on whether we funded gain-of-function virus research. At the committee hearings, he said, well, it wasn't gain-of-function research, it was something else. And I think that with what Tulsi published, there's more than enough evidence to confirm that Dr. Fauci lied about this. Hopefully, in addition to ours, the Senate will also refer Dr. Fauci for criminal charges to the House. Представителей в отношении доктора Фаучи. And of course, this new and improved Department of Justice will do the right thing. No one has been held accountable for COVID. I mean, just look at public education. Whether you like public education or not, we suffered because of Dr. Fauci's demands and Dr. Fauci's recommendations.
When it comes to education and the COVID situation, we really suffered. We suffered because of Dr. Fauci's demands and recommendations. Young people were dying from COVID. Others faced serious health consequences. Our children were falling behind in their studies. For example, 7th grade students missed an entire year of schooling. We'll see. Maybe this will affect our national debt. Because of Congress's ridiculous reaction, there were lending programs and those PPPs supported by many Republicans. Many Republicans had a hand in this, and the stimulus measures from the Democrats. All of this drove the debt even higher, and all of this is because of one person who never admitted the truth. COVID started in a laboratory in China, which was funded by the UN itself, supporting a crazy scientific project. A scientific project. What is the path to actual prosecution? How can we get a trial? Or are we just going to test legal theories during the proceedings? Almost on his last day in office, Biden signed 8,000, as we're told, pardons. How could he physically do that? How can we prove that he never did anything like that? That he could barely move? That he, I meant to say, could barely think straight, but I'm almost sure he didn't even realize what he was doing. What should we do with those people who committed crimes and now can't be reached by the law because they forged his signatures themselves? Can the long arm of the law reach people like Dr. Fauci?
The fact that we brought in all these people, the chiefs of staff for Jill Biden, the chiefs of staff for Joe Biden, all the administrative assistants, no one has ever been able to testify under oath that Joe Biden talked to them about any kind of pardon. We requested all the emails. We requested Joe Biden's daily calendar. There wasn't a single meeting about pardons. There were no discussions. And the president has the right to grant pardons, and there are no limits to this right, although I believe there should be. I think many presidents have abused the pardon process. I'm not thrilled about some of Trump's pardons. But ultimately, the president has the constitutional authority to do this. I don't even want to get into the discussion about whether a pen can be used, but we spent long hours testifying to prove that Joe Biden, as president of the United States, did not authorize these pardons. And that should be enough in court to uphold President Trump's order to revoke all these pardons.
That is, there were no records of such meetings or discussions in Joe Biden's work schedules. Although presidents have the power to grant pardons, those powers are, well, not limited by anything, right? The question is how they were used, but there is no evidence that he actually did that he was the one who did it, that it was him and not someone else. Most likely, judging by all the data, someone else did it instead of him. And the Constitution doesn't say that the Chief of Staff or the First Lady can pardon anyone. It doesn't mention the First Lady having that right, does it? There is no evidence that Joe Biden ever authorized a single pardon except for the pardon of his own son, which he signed personally. Forget about evidence of the pardon people's guilt. Biden himself never said, "Yes, I reviewed the documents, I looked at the evidence, and this man," well, and so on, right? Anyway, look. How much time did it take to get to this point? For Congress, while dealing with 5 or 10 or 100, maybe even more cases of catastrophic deception of America and its people, how long did it take to get to the point where they are now starting to bring these cases to court? Which, by the way, is also not a very quick process in the courts. All we can do is pray that within the next year or two, decisions will be made that could allow Trump to overturn all the pardons that we are all sure, we think, I don't know, almost 100% know, are illegal, which were given either for money or for something else, or to help party members. Because the party is more important than the country, this will save all these people from possible prosecution, because they knew for sure that they were breaking the law. And what do you call a person who breaks the law? He's called a criminal. Today, in this video, we actually have 3 parts, and they are more closely connected than it seems at first glance. First, you heard what Dr. Fauci did personally. Next, we will travel around the world and see what our lives have become because of the decisions made based on those actions. Education, health, mental state, money, entire countries. Then, separately and honestly, I will show you what those who believe vaccines were unnecessary have to say, with their own arguments. Well, without my own judgment, since I'm not a researcher or a doctor, right? And at the end, we'll return to where we started, to one specific person, who actually stands at the epicenter of this story. Let's talk about that. What did COVID do to the population of America and the population of the entire globe? From my point of view, after the bubonic plague in Europe, this was the deadliest event in human health, possibly even surpassing the Spanish flu of World War I times. And a little later, I'll tell you about people who sat at the same table without masks. They laughed. They celebrated that birthday. In those very days and weeks when they were alive, they forbade you from saying goodbye to your dying parents. This is documented in photos and videos. You will see it. Look at what happened. Not in order, not neatly arranged, because in reality, none of this happened in an orderly way. It came crashing down on humanity all at once, from all sides. Restrictions. Lockdowns, you all know them. Closed schools, closed restaurants, gyms, salons, ban on non-emergency surgeries in hospitals. The wording included tumors that could wait. For many, they didn't wait. Ban on funerals, no more than a few people allowed. Ban on visiting the dying in hospitals and nursing homes. Masks. Under threat of a fine, and later vaccine passports, without which you couldn't enter a supermarket or board a plane. And in China, apartment doors were welded shut from the outside or locked with padlocks. They hung huge padlocks so you couldn't possibly get out of there. New York, March 25, 2020. Governor Cuomo signs an order. Nursing homes are required to accept patients with COVID homes. Where people are, if they get infected, that's the scariest thing. They don't have the right to test in nursing homes. So not only do they have to accept anyone, you also don't have the right to know if someone has COVID or not. 9,000 transfers, gentlemen. More than 9,000 people with COVID were transferred to hospitals. The state then underreports the death toll. They say by a third. We only underreported by a third, only by a third. The governor's assistant admits this on an audio recording. They hid the data because they were afraid it would be used against them politically. In other words, they were afraid of going to jail. They were afraid that parents, children would find out that their parents were killed and would come to kill them. The official death toll in New York nursing homes during the pandemic, their official number is 13 to 16,000 people. Well, gentlemen, knowing our bastards, I'll say this, at least 32,000. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, so you know this kind of filth isn't just in America. En masse, without the family's consent, without talking to the patient themselves, elderly people in nursing homes are given do not resuscitate orders. Why? Because you're elderly. The government regulator finds at least 508 cases and calls them potentially illegal. What are these orders? What is an order? What kind of decisions are these? And the decision? We'll let you die if your heart fails. We won't resuscitate you if you suddenly stop breathing. We won't resuscitate because they're old. Because they're elderly. Our civilization, our entire civilization is built on something else. But here we won't resuscitate you. In India, they found out that 4 hours is a deadly matter. That's how much time the country was given to prepare before a nationwide lockdown. They implemented a nationwide lockdown, and 100 million workers and immigrants were left without money and without transportation. Gentlemen, without money and without transportation, they couldn't go to work, couldn't go home, nowhere, nothing. Without money and without transportation, tens of millions set out on foot toward home. Some walked more than 1,000 kilometers in China. Well, people come up with all sorts of things. Yes, brilliant. Just for that purpose, I don't even know what for. So China, the place is called Urumqi. A residential building is on fire. A residential building is on fire. People are screaming from there. They can't get out. It's already been 100 days of lockdown. The entrances to the building are blocked by COVID lockdown barriers, and fire trucks can't get through, not even close. People are posting on social media, those who are there saying, "We're suffocating, we're burning alive." In Canada, the government is freezing citizens' bank accounts without a court order for the first time in the country's history. They just freeze them and that's it. But for what reason? They were protesting the COVID restrictions. I mean, how so? Did they take it? Yes. They closed their accounts. Now they can't access their own money. They don't have any money left. They were protesting against the measures that were taken by the Canadian government regarding COVID. They were protesting. They were deprived of a way to make a living. They were deprived of food. Everything else, drinking water. Now about school. In 2 years, 8th graders lost 2/3 of the school year in math. In every state, without exception, 20 years of progress wiped out in one blow. 12th graders in 2024 showed historically low scores in math and English. That means even after 4 years, there has been no recovery. The average student, according to calculations by economists from Stanford, lost about 6% of their income over their entire lifetime. This isn't a one-time figure. It's lost productivity for decades to come. I don't even want to get into this right now. On a global scale, 95% of students worldwide were affected by school closures. Ladies and gentlemen, meanwhile, healthcare. In the United States alone, 4 million breast cancer screenings were missed. Do you know how many people didn't find out in time and died because of it? 4 million colorectal screenings, 1.5 million prostate screenings. At least 10,000 additional cancer deaths over 10 years, according to the National Cancer Institute. A new study in JAMA Oncology 17,390 cancer deaths occurred in the U.S. during the first 2 years of the pandemic. Gentlemen, the worst are the brain, lung, and pancreas. In Canada, the projection looks like this, plus 21. 1,000 excess cancer deaths over 10 years. In other words, there were this many. Then they calculated it increased, and then it went back to what it was before. So it's clear that these are excess deaths for some reason. The only reason there was the pandemic and the fight against it. And that's not counting heart attacks and strokes, for which people were simply afraid to go to the hospital, and the hospitals wouldn't admit them. A 25% increase in anxiety and depression worldwide in just the first year alone. In other words, psychiatric services were disrupted in 93% of countries worldwide, exactly when help was needed the most. By disrupted, I mean they weren't accepting patients, they refused, hung up the phone, closed the doors, wouldn't let people in, and so on. $12.5 trillion, according to the IMF estimates alone. That means lost money. According to other broader models, humanity has lost $16 trillion. $19.5 trillion were printed and borrowed by the government just to somehow keep the people afloat. It's the same thing. While all these people were forbidden to say goodbye to their dying parents, forbidden to study, forbidden to have surgery, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi went without a mask to get her hair done in a closed salon, even though she publicly demanded that every American wear a mask, and she said it was a duty, a patriotic duty for everyone. As soon as the camera was off, she took off her mask. California Governor Gavin Newsom goes to a private dinner for 12 people at the elite restaurant The French Laundry. $350 per person, no masks, no distancing, and 10 days after that, he imposes restrictions on ordinary Californians. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock posts in the morning, "Stay home, don't travel," on Thanksgiving. Half an hour later, he boards a plane to fly to his family in Mississippi. San Jose mayor apologizes for gathering with 8 people from 5 households, even though his own rule only allowed 3. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson holds at least 12 parties at Downing Street, while Britons are not allowed to see their dying loved ones because it's dangerous to be in the same room with people. But he becomes the first sitting prime minister to be found breaking the law of his own country. 20% of high school students in the U.S. have seriously considered suicide. 9% have tried. The youngest children born in these years are behind in speech development. Do you know why? Children learn to speak by looking at an adult's mouth, and the adult's mouth was covered with fabric. In American prisons, COVID outbreaks spread in overcrowded cells without access to medical care. Healthcare workers, military personnel, and government employees were dismissed for refusing vaccination. What happened to us? Maybe nothing happened. Maybe COVID just showed us who we really are. And then, I'll be honest and say what many are afraid to say out loud. If even some vaccine critics turn out to be right, then everything you just heard becomes something far more frightening than a catastrophic mistake. Wait until the end. And here's what's especially important for those of us watching from abroad: Los Angeles, New York, Germany, Israel. We left countries where the authorities were not held accountable for their decisions, where the truth was hidden for years, and the guilty were not punished. And that's exactly why we must recognize here, in America, in Britain, in Canada, the same pattern, just in a different setting. If we stay silent now, we will betray the very lesson that led many of us to leave in the first place. There are also those who claim that vaccines were not necessary and that they only made the rules worse. Then all of this simply turns into the deliberate killing of millions of people for either financial or political gain. Now I will give you information about the position of those who are against vaccines. There are serious people who are engaged in science, great scientists who say this, And you can't just ignore what these people are saying, because we already know how many of our rulers are vile creatures who also walk on two legs, who have a very charming smile, and the ability to behave nicely in front of the camera, but they absolutely don't care about us. They would sell us out for a penny. Here are the arguments against vaccines. So, the number of deaths from vaccines is many times higher than the official data. That's what those who are against vaccination say. They rely on the American voluntary reporting system and on an old study by Harvard Peregrine Healthcare. It showed that less than 1% of real side effects are reported to such systems. That's why the official numbers are multiplied by an underreporting factor, which leads to millions. Former BlackRock executive Edward Dowd and his colleagues refer to insurance company reports about a sharp increase, tens of percent above normal, in life insurance payouts among working-age people in 2021. The logic is very simple. The only major event during this period was mass vaccination, so the correlation points to the cause. Myocarditis in young men. This is not made up out of thin air. Serious journals have indeed published data on the increased relative risk of myocarditis after vaccines in teenagers and men aged 18 to 29, especially after the second dose. From a confirmed narrow risk, vaccine opponents draw a broader conclusion that many unexplained cases of sudden death among young people and athletes may also be linked to vaccination. Now Trumpy. American embalmer Richard Kirschman claims that he began systematically finding abnormal long fibrous formations in the bodies of vaccinated deceased, which he had not seen before, and that normal blood does not clot like this. Another argument is that vaccines temporarily suppress the immune response. This has been shown in several early studies, and from this temporary effect they conclude that there is a long-term increased risk of cancer, including a rapid recurrence of cancer that was cured long ago. They refer to Pfizer's own preclinical studies and the Japanese regulator PMDA. They showed that lipid nanoparticles accumulate not only at the injection site, but also in the liver, spleen, ovaries, and adrenal glands in animals. Conclusion: the spike protein is produced throughout the body and can damage blood vessels. That's why there are clots and heart inflammation. And now let's sum up. Here's what happened because of COVID. Trillions of dollars were lost. According to the IMF's most conservative estimate, 12.5 trillion. And this figure, according to the IMF itself, will only continue to grow. Years have been lost. The years of education for an entire generation of children have been lost, setting them back, let's say about 12 years in terms of knowledge. Health has been lost. Millions of missed screenings, tens of thousands of excess deaths from cancer, heart attacks, strokes that could have been prevented, and lives have been lost. Millions of lives all over the globe, and not just from the virus itself, but also from how people responded to it. Now think about this. If we had known from the very beginning that this was a man-made virus, how exactly? By whom exactly? We would have already figured it out. A natural bat coronavirus into which a human spike protein was surgically inserted. If you and I had known and understood all this, then probably there wouldn't have been such panic, such chaos, such a huge number of victims. I firmly believe this. At the center of everything that happened, at the center of this whole tragedy, at the center of all these nightmarish things, that happened on half the planet. There is one person at the center. That's my position. Not a fact established by the court. But that's exactly how I see this story. I understand that there may be forces behind him. I admit that if China had been openly accused of doing this, he would have immediately, let's say, reported the role of the United States of America, that it didn't come only from China, but also from Dr. Fauci and his funding. I suspect that someone ordered this to be released into the world without warning anyone. Someone ordered to keep quiet and wait until America got sick, really sick, so that Trump wouldn't be reelected. I believe that this person should also be found and punished if these suspicions are confirmed. And to begin with, in my opinion, we need to bring Dr. Fauci into the spotlight. and fully expose this whole idea, his entire story, all of his activities, in order to either officially confirm these accusations or dismiss them. Because no matter who was behind him, I am convinced that he played his nightmarish, deadly role. As I have already said, in my opinion, he is on the same level as the most nightmarish killers and bloodthirsty scoundrels of the 20th century. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. As new information comes in, I will tell you about it. Goodbye.